What if I told you that spiritual awakening isn't just about peace, love, and enlightenment, but also about alienation, burden, and even grief? That the moment you wake up, you no longer truly belong to the society that raised you. Carl Jung once warned that to become conscious is a privilege and a dangerous one. To awaken spiritually means to see through illusions that society depends on, the chase for status, endless consumption, the masks we wear to fit in. But here lies the hidden cost. Once you see the machinery of the collective unconscious, you cannot unsee it. You may find yourself estranged from friends who still chase what you no longer value, or feeling the weight of truths that others refuse to carry. Awakening is not escape, it is confrontation. Confrontation with the shadow inside us, and with the collective shadow of a culture obsessed with speed, productivity, and distraction. Society often resists the awakened individual because your very existence challenges its myths. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." To awaken is to sacrifice the comfort of ignorance for the responsibility of truth. And that responsibility can feel lonely. What if waking up wasn't the blessing we always imagined, but also a burden we rarely speak of? We live in a society that praises productivity, distraction, and conformity. The rules are unspoken but deeply ingrained. Chase success, accumulate possessions, stay entertained, keep moving. Beneath the surface, the collective whispers, "Don't look too closely, don't question too deeply, don't disrupt the dream." And yet, some do. For reasons they can barely explain, something shakes them out of the slumber. It could be a profound loss, a near-death experience, a mystical moment, or simply a slow disillusionment with the shallow promises of modern life. Suddenly, the veil thins. What once looked real, the race for money, status, approval, now feels hollow. They begin to see through the illusions that keep most people asleep. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." To awaken is to step into a higher awareness, to realize the unconscious forces that drive individuals and society alike. It is to see beyond the mask, the persona, the socially acceptable identity we wear to survive. Awakening is a privilege because it opens doors that many never walk through. But it is also a burden because once you see, you cannot unsee. Think of Plato's famous allegory of the cave. Imagine people chained in darkness, watching shadows flicker on the wall, mistaking them for reality. If one person breaks free and steps outside, the blinding light of truth is almost unbearable at first. But once their eyes adjust, they see reality for what it is, vivid, vast, alive. When they return to the cave to tell the others, they are mocked, rejected, even attacked. Because those still chained to the shadows don't want their fragile world disrupted. This is the paradox of awakening. On one hand, it is liberation, the discovery of meaning beyond the trivialities of daily life. On the other, it is isolation. Awakening pulls you out of the collective dream, and suddenly the conversations, goals, and concerns of ordinary life can feel strangely distant, even absurd. The privilege is that you now see with new eyes. You recognize patterns, archetypes, and unconscious drives in yourself and others. You no longer mistake the mask for the soul. You become aware of the deeper layers of psyche, what Jung called the collective unconscious, the universal symbols and forces shaping human experience. You realize life is more than survival or success. It is a process of individuation, of becoming whole. But here comes the burden. Society doesn't reward individuation. It rewards conformity. The person who questions too much, who withdraws from the race, who refuses to play by the usual rules, this person unsettles the system. You may feel alienated from friends and family who once understood you. You may feel caught between two worlds, the ordinary life you once inhabited and the deeper reality you now perceive. And this is where the cost begins to show itself. To be spiritually awake in a modern society is not simply to be enlightened, it is also to be estranged. You might look around and see people obsessing over promotions, gossip, politics, or the latest gadget and wonder, how do they not see through this? But at the same time, you realize they belong to a world that you no longer fully do. Awakening doesn't just remove illusions, it removes comfort. Ignorance, after all, has its own kind of bliss. Before awakening, life may have felt simpler, even if it was shallow. Now, the weight of awareness sits on your shoulders. You see the collective unconscious in action, mass hysteria, blind consumerism, shallow distractions, and you realize how much of society is built on denial. Jung knew this burden well. He wrote that most people would rather remain unconscious than face the demands of awakening. Because to awaken is to accept responsibility, not only for your own shadow, but for seeing the shadow of the culture you live in. And responsibility, unlike distraction, is heavy. So the first hidden cost of awakening is this: you lose the comfort of belonging. You trade the simplicity of sleep for the complexity of sight. And while sight is liberating, it is also painful. Awakening is a privilege because it brings depth, meaning, and authenticity into your life. But it is a burden because it estranges you from the collective illusions that make society feel stable. Like the one who leaves Plato's cave, you may find yourself standing in the sun, free yet alone. And so the question lingers: if awakening makes us outsiders in the very world we live in, is the privilege worth the burden? Why does society resist the awakened individual? Why does truth so often sound like heresy in a world built on illusion? Carl Jung observed that every person wears a mask, what he called the persona. This mask allows us to move through society smoothly, to be accepted, to fulfill the roles expected of us: student, worker, parent, citizen. It is not inherently bad. The persona helps us function. But when we awaken, when we start to question, we begin to see the cracks in the mask. We realize that what passes for normal is not always natural. What passes for sanity is often just conformity. Here is where society's resistance emerges. Collective systems, families, workplaces, nations, depend on people playing their roles without too much disruption. The system thrives on predictability. But an awakened person threatens predictability. They no longer blindly chase status. They ask uncomfortable questions. They refuse to sacrifice meaning for appearances. To the system, this is dangerous. Think of the whistleblower who sees corruption in an institution, or the family member who refuses to keep generational secrets, or the friend who suddenly questions the culture of endless consumption. These individuals are rarely celebrated at first. Instead, they are criticized, mocked, or even cast out, because their awakening exposes the collective shadow. Jung understood that groups resist awakening because the unconscious prefers stability to growth. The unconscious seeks to maintain its illusions, even if those illusions are harmful. That's why prophets, mystics, and visionaries throughout history have often been misunderstood or persecuted. Their very presence disrupts the fragile harmony of collective sleep. The cost of being spiritually awake, then, is not only inner turmoil, but outer resistance. You might find that the conversations you once enjoyed now feel hollow. People around you might dismiss your insights as too heavy, too intense, or unrealistic. They may urge you to just be normal, to stop overthinking. What they're really saying is, stop disturbing the dream we're all invested in. This resistance is not always malicious. Often, it comes from fear. When you awaken, you hold up a mirror to those still asleep. You remind them, without even trying, that there is more to life than the roles they play. For some, that mirror is unbearable. To acknowledge your awakening means they must confront the possibility of their own illusions. And so, easier to dismiss you, to marginalize you, than to face that discomfort. Jung spoke often about individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all parts of the psyche. Individuation requires stepping away from the herd, leaving behind collective expectations. But stepping away comes with loneliness, criticism, even hostility. Because the herd does not like to lose its members. And the herd especially resents those who suggest that its path may not lead to truth. The modern world, with its obsession on productivity, image, and instant gratification, makes this resistance even sharper. If you slow down, reflect, and live authentically, you become an outlier. Imagine saying at a corporate meeting, "I think our endless drive for growth is destroying not only the planet, but also our souls." You might be correct, but correctness does not protect you from backlash. The system resists anything that challenges its foundations. This is why Jung described awakening as both liberation and crucifixion. To step into your authentic self often means being misunderstood. It means carrying the weight of being different, of not fitting the mold. You may lose friendships. You may clash with family. You may find your values misaligned with the very culture you live in. And yet, this resistance reveals something important. Society's discomfort is a sign that you are touching truth. Awakening shakes the foundations of collective illusions, and shaking foundations is never welcomed. But it is necessary. The hidden cost here is social exile. The awakened individual carries the burden of being a stranger in familiar places, a foreigner in their own culture. You may still move through the world, but always with a sense of not fully belonging. Jung believed this exile was not meaningless suffering, but part of the deeper process of individuation. To truly become yourself, you must be willing to endure the resistance of others. In time, your authenticity may even inspire those around you. But in the beginning, it will almost always provoke their defenses. So, the awakened walk a difficult road, free in spirit, but resisted by society. The world says, stay asleep, stay predictable, stay safe. But the soul whispers, awaken, even if it costs you everything. What if awakening didn't just reveal light, but also dragged the darkness into the open? Most people think of spiritual awakening as a kind of escape, a journey toward peace, joy, bliss. And yes, there are moments of profound beauty, deep clarity, even transcendence. But Carl Jung warned that awakening does not just open us to the higher self, it also forces us to confront the shadow. The shadow is everything we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. It is the anger we suppress to appear kind, the desires we bury to seem pure, the fears we mask with confidence. Jung called the shadow the thing a person has no wish to be. And when we awaken, the shadow comes knocking. Why? Because true awakening isn't about becoming angelic, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness requires integration of both light and dark. To be spiritually awake is to see not only the divine in ourselves, but also the primitive, the wounded, the cruel. This is one of the hidden costs. We are forced to face parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. Think of it like turning on a light in a cluttered basement. For years, we lived upstairs, pretending the basement didn't exist. But awakening sends us down the stairs, lamp in hand. Suddenly, we see the dust, the cobwebs, the forgotten boxes filled with memories we'd hoped to bury. At first, it's overwhelming. We wonder if perhaps ignorance really was bliss. But slowly, we realize the basement holds not only trash, but also treasures, parts of ourselves that, once reclaimed, give us strength and authenticity. The inner shadow is only half the story. There is also the collective shadow. Jung saw that entire societies repress truths they don't want to face. In modern life, this shadow shows up in many forms: our denial of mortality, our obsession with material success while ignoring inner poverty, our tendency to distract ourselves from suffering instead of confronting it. The collective shadow lurks behind consumerism, political polarization, ecological destruction. When you awaken, you begin to see these patterns. You recognize how much of culture is built not on wisdom, but on avoidance. You notice the way entertainment numbs us, how advertising feeds insecurity, how politics thrives on fear. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The illusions no longer work on you, but that doesn't mean they stop existing. You now live with the discomfort of seeing the shadow everywhere. This is another hidden cost, the loneliness of perception. Many people would rather stay blind to both their inner darkness and the collective shadow. They cling to comfort, distraction, and denial. The awakened individual, however, cannot return to that blindness. Instead, they carry the heavy burden of seeing clearly what others refuse to admit. But here lies the paradox. Confronting the shadow is also the path to power. Jung insisted that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, the goal of awakening is not to escape darkness, but to integrate it. When you acknowledge your shadow, you stop being controlled by it. The anger you once repressed can become healthy assertiveness. The fear you avoided can transform into courage. The collective shadow you notice can inspire you to live differently, to embody values that challenge the cultural sickness around you. Still, this work is not glamorous. It is raw, uncomfortable, and often lonely. It means looking in the mirror and seeing not only your higher self, but also the wounds you carry, the roles you've played in your own suffering, the ways you've unconsciously hurt others. It means realizing that awakening doesn't make you better than those around you. It simply makes you more responsible. The awakened individual learns that light and shadow are inseparable. To deny one is to distort the other. Awakening, then, is not transcendence in the sense of floating above the world. It is descent into the depths, where both the demons and the treasures lie. So, the hidden cost here is the confrontation with darkness. To awaken is to realize that you are not only the hero of your story, but also the villain, the trickster, the wounded child. It is to see that society is not only a place of progress and innovation, but also of greed, denial, and destruction. And yet, this confrontation is the very thing that makes awakening real. Because only by facing the shadow can we claim our wholeness. Only by descending into the depths can we rise authentically. And so awakening is not the end of suffering, but the beginning of responsibility. The question is, will you dare to face what most people spend their lives avoiding? Why does awakening so often feel like exile? Why does clarity bring with it the ache of separation? When people imagine spiritual awakening, they picture connection, oneness with the universe, unity with all life. And yes, there are moments of profound interconnectedness that awakeners describe, the realization that everything is part of one great whole. But between those moments lies a quieter, heavier truth. Awakening is often lonely. Carl Jung wrote about the individuation process, the path of becoming whole, of aligning with the deeper self rather than the expectations of the collective. Individuation, however, pulls us away from the herd. It asks us to step out of the crowd, to stop playing roles just because everyone else does. And in that step away, a gap opens. Suddenly, you are not where others are. This is one of the hidden costs of awakening, a deep sense of estrangement. Friends who once felt close may now feel distant, their concerns trivial compared to the questions burning inside you. Family members may not understand why you no longer chase the same goals, why your values have shifted. Society at large may see you as impractical, even eccentric, for valuing inner growth over outer success. And yet, this loneliness is not proof of failure. It is a sign of growth. Jung said that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But authenticity often means breaking from convention, which means standing apart. Imagine a tree growing in a dense forest. Most trees grow straight up, competing for sunlight. But one tree grows at an angle, seeking its own space, stretching into its own form. From the forest's perspective, this tree is odd, even wrong. But from the perspective of the soul, it is simply true to its nature. To awaken is to become that tree, to risk standing apart in order to be authentic. This loneliness is not just social, it is existential. Awakening confronts us with the vastness of life, the inevitability of death, the mystery of existence. Many people prefer distractions to avoid these questions. But the awakened cannot escape them. They feel the weight of existence more acutely. They see the fragility of human endeavors, the impermanence of all things. And this clarity, while beautiful, also creates distance. How do you discuss the meaning of death over casual dinner conversation? How do you share the ache of existence with those still satisfied by small talk? Yet within this loneliness lies the call of the soul. Jung believed that the soul longs for authenticity, for a life aligned with the deeper currents of the psyche. The very loneliness you feel when awakening is a sign that you are hearing the soul's call. It is pulling you away from the noise of the collective so you can listen to something more profound. Think of the mystics, the poets, the visionaries of history. Many lived on the margins of their societies. They were misunderstood, even ridiculed. But their solitude was not wasted. It became the soil where wisdom took root. Their loneliness gave birth to insights that eventually nourished the collective, even if the collective rejected them at first. The hidden cost, then, is this aching in between, no longer fully at home in the old world, not yet fully at peace in the new. The awakened often feel like exiles wandering through familiar landscapes that now feel strange. But exile, paradoxically, is what opens the way to deeper belonging, not with the crowd, but with the soul, with the archetypal forces that underlie human experience, with something eternal. Jung wrote that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. This is the heart of the awakened person's struggle. It is not that you are physically alone, it is that the truths you carry are often unspeakable to those still asleep. And yet, this solitude carries its own gift. It strips away the need for constant approval. It pushes you to rely not on the crowd, but on your inner compass. It teaches you to find companionship in silence, meaning in symbols, and connection in the unseen. Over time, loneliness transforms into solitude, and solitude into strength. So, the hidden cost here is profound isolation. But within that isolation is the voice of the soul, calling you deeper, urging you to keep walking the path even when few walk beside you. Because in the end, the awakened must walk alone, not forever, but long enough to become whole. And once whole, they discover that loneliness was not exile at all, but initiation. If awakening costs so much, alienation, shadow, loneliness, why do it at all? This is the question that lingers after everything we've explored. We've seen that awakening is not simply a doorway into light. It is a tearing away of illusions, a confrontation with the shadow, a separation from the herd, and a lonely walk through uncharted territory. It can feel heavy, even unbearable at times. So why choose it? Why not retreat back into the comfort of sleep? Carl Jung gave us an answer, though perhaps not the one many would hope for. He reminded us that the purpose of life is not happiness, at least not in the shallow sense society defines it. The purpose of life is meaning. Happiness, as society sells it, is fleeting. The next purchase, the next achievement, the next distraction. Meaning, however, roots us in something deeper. It connects us to the timeless archetypes of the psyche, to the unfolding story of the soul. Awakening costs us comfort, yes, but it gifts us meaning. And meaning is what sustains us when pleasure fades and illusions collapse. Think of the difference between someone chasing a paycheck and someone living out their calling. The first may look successful on the outside, but often feels empty. The second may face struggle, ridicule, even poverty, but their life pulses with authenticity. Awakening is choosing the second path. It may not look easy, but it feels true. Another gift of awakening is authenticity. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole, of integrating not only the light but also the shadow, not only the persona but also the soul. When you awaken, you are no longer bound to the masks society gave you. You begin to live from your true center. This doesn't mean perfection, it means honesty. It means living in alignment with who you really are, even when it costs you approval. And here lies another paradox. Though awakening may isolate you at first, it ultimately connects you more deeply than ever. Not always to the collective around you, but to life itself, to the symbols, the archetypes, the currents that move beneath history and culture. You find kinship not just with people, but with the very fabric of existence. This is the deeper communion that makes the loneliness bearable. Awakening also makes you a seed for transformation. Jung believed that the individual who integrates their shadow contributes not only to their own wholeness, but also to the healing of the collective. When one person awakens, they become a mirror, a catalyst, a living question mark that challenges the status quo. Even if society resists, your very being plants a seed in others. They may not admit it, but your authenticity stirs something inside them. Of course, this doesn't mean the cost disappears. You will still feel misunderstood at times. You will still wrestle with the shadow. You will still feel the ache of separation. But the cost becomes bearable when you realize what you gain. Truth, meaning, authenticity, and a life that is truly your own. Jung once said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." Awakening is that inferno. It is the fire that burns away illusions, even as it forges the soul into something enduring. So the final hidden cost is this: you can never go back. Once awake, you cannot return to sleep. But the final gift is also this: you would not want to. Because even though the path is hard, it is real. It is alive. It is yours. And so we return to the question, why awaken? The answer is simple. Because the alternative, living asleep, chasing shadows, denying your soul, is no life at all. Awakening is both cost and gift, burden and blessing, exile and initiation. It strips away comfort, but gives you meaning. It alienates you from the crowd, but connects you to your soul. It demands responsibility, but grants authenticity. So if you are walking this path, if you feel the weight of its cost, know that you are not alone. Across time and culture, others have walked it too. And though society may resist, the soul rejoices. Because in the end, the greatest tragedy is not the pain of awakening, it is the emptiness of never having awakened at all. If this exploration of Jung's ideas and the hidden cost of awakening resonated with you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next journey into depth psychology, spirituality, and the unseen dimensions of modern life. And if you know someone who's on their own awakening path, share this with them. They might need to hear it today.